My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Jess Lyon. It's June 25th, 2025. We're at Davis Wright Tremaine in Portland. Jess, thank you so much for joining us today. We usually start by asking why wine. In your case, let's talk about the law. Why did you get into law?
I got into the law because I liked helping people in agriculture, food, beverage industries solve problems. I'll get into a little bit of my personal background from that. I actually grew up in farm country in rural eastern Washington. We didn't know anything about wine because grapes didn't grow in the Palouse, and my parents didn't drink wine, didn't drink anything at all, actually. But I knew a lot about agriculture. I studied and worked in agricultural economics and agribusiness before I was a lawyer, and had a couple work opportunities after I got my master's degree that helped me kind of put people together in the food chain. One was some experience I had in a project in Hungary, and was able to help people who didn't really, literally in that case, speak the same language, let alone speak sort of on common business terms and sophistication, understand each other better and actually come to some good business opportunities together. And so, so I wanted to stay close to agriculture in particular, but didn't see myself returning to production ag. And so I went to law school intending to come out with doing something in ag and food and beverage industries.
So let's talk a little bit about that life before that. You mentioned being born in Eastern Washington and Palouse. Tell me about kind of early life, childhood, and life before college.
I grew up on 40 acres with a white farmhouse and big red barn and steers in the pasture, lots of chores. Farming wasn't our primary source of income. My dad worked for a company that sold fuel and fertilizer and chemicals and tires to farmers around the area. But this was just sort of odd job, extra income, and a lot of work, and learned the value of hard work. Put myself to and through college between some of the ag projects of my own growing up, and then working for farmers.
So approaching college, tell me about your undergrad. Why did you choose to go where you went?
I ended up going to Washington State University, just down the road. I was partly going to WSU and the program was economic decision, really. There was great scholarships for kids who had good grades and would study agriculture at Wazoo, and I knew I was paying for it. So that was a big part of it. But I also had formed a relationship in high school with a person who's still a mentor of mine. Dr. Ken Cassavant was just a wonderful teacher, mentor who was in the program there. His specialty was kind of like ag transportation economics, but he was just really encouraging of, me seeing a bigger picture and how big the opportunities could be for me, and encouraged me to get involved in lots of things, not even just directly to the, my academic career and professional career, but things that I just liked doing on campus and would help me become a better leader. So he kind of, sealed the deal for that to be at Washington State. It's where I met my wife, which is pretty awesome. We got married young, went to grad school at Purdue together in the same field. Purdue's in Indiana, also not wine country. There are grapes in Indiana, I guess. But there I started getting much more into kind of the food side of things, and I took a lot of business courses besides the econ courses. The econometrics was getting a little too hard for me. I could do the math, but no longer understand the math. So started focusing a lot on business and strategy and leadership courses there. And then while we were just wrapping up at Purdue, we had the opportunity to get my wife and I both, and then also another student who I think was like an MBA student at Villanova, we were placed on a contract project through Agriculture Cooperative Development International in Budapest. That was kind of a 6-month program to work with Hungarian food and ag companies, Wright, just a year or so after the wall had fallen. And they had, no clue. They were so desperate they would take advice from like 24-year-olds. So each of us were assigned projects a week at a time to like meet with a company that volunteered to get involved with this sort of consulting program that basically was a USAID funded project. May it rest in peace. That's the 25 stamp right there that AID is going down apparently. Like for example, one of the projects I was mentioning was I was assigned to work with a group that was like, the Hungarian company was in the business of producing seeds for farmers, all different kinds of seeds and seed products. And the week that I was there, they were also meeting with a representative of PepsiCo out of the UK. And Pepsi, when the wall fell, said, oh my goodness, we need to have chip factories in Central Europe. In order for us to invest in a chip factory, we need to know that we can grow the right kind of potatoes here that work for our chip factories. Well, who can help us figure out if we can grow enough of the right potatoes? And the seed company. So they were approaching this Hungarian company about just doing a bunch of trials for them. And they were going to pay them to say trial these potatoes at different sites around Hungary or elsewhere in Central Europe. And the Hungarians were very afraid, super intimidated by that. And they were, kind of rough and tumble. This is rural Hungary, kind of rough and tumble types. Again, and they were all promoted to their positions because they were the best scientists, not because they were the best business leaders. That's how you got ahead in the former socialist sort of communist-led environment. They were intimidated and just like, well, this is never going to work. This British guy, it was August, it was like 100 and hell degrees, and he'd been riding around all day in a little tiny Skoda car, which is like a really bad version of a Fiat. Wearing a seersucker suit, I kid you not, like all over dirt roads in Hungary. He comes in like sweaty and dirty, and I think they told him how terrible his idea was. And then we introduced him to the guy who was in charge of the potato program. And we're doing all this mostly through interpreters, except for this guy he comes in and it's this Hungarian kind of farmer type, and he's like the leading like potato expert in this company, which potatoes really weren't that big of a thing there. And he comes in and he's got like this kind of farm shirt unbuttoned like deep down to his belly, and he's got a big belly. And the Brit comes in his sweaty suit, and he's like been driven around like 10 hours, probably car sick. And he's just like, you could tell he's sort of like, get me out of here, but I've been sent on this mission. I'm going to see if we can do this. And the one guy, he's like, he sticks his hand out to the Brit, and he's like, me, super tuber guy, which was his translation of potato expert. But super tuber guy will ring in history in my ears anyway. So we had dinner. That was fine. And then the next day I had a chance to I was almost like mediating. I was in the room with the representative of PepsiCo saying, hey, don't take it personally, but these are people whose jobs and maybe worse used to be on the line. Like if they started a project and failed, that's not, failure wasn't an option, right? They also weren't used to sort of people funding things that might not really work. So don't take it personally, just sort of their business and entity history. And then I'd go to the Hungarians and I'd say, hey, listen, they're not going to hold you responsible. They're not going to sue you if this doesn't work. They think you're the best to see if this might work, and they're going to pay for it all. So give it a try. And then, we had some meetings and got it together, and ended up doing, I don't know if Pepsi ever built a plant there, but then ended up doing, some trials and got some stuff together. And, part of that was just language barrier and cultural barrier, but there was a good bit of it that was like kind of small town, rural folks dealing with somebody from London with a lot of money behind them. And they just didn't understand each other on that level either. And I was able to kind of help them come together. And it was sort of that made me start thinking, maybe I should go to law school and be like a business lawyer. And here I am.
So at that point, you had mentioned that you wanted to come out the other side doing something with ag, something with business. When you were deciding on a law school, heading into law school, what did you think you might do afterward?
So I went to law school in the DC metro area at George Mason University. After we got back from Hungary, my wife and I both worked for USDA, only a year before I went to law school. And she stayed on and worked. I had studied a lot, in particular international trade. Not that international trade might be, as much more the focus. But got good grades in law school and took kind of some specialty classes and did some specialty work, won a fellowship to write a paper and do some research for the Food and Drug Law Association, which ended up being kind of like a little bit forecasting about sort of deregulation of food, but sort of the way that plaintiffs' lawyers honestly would step in to keep food companies in check. So on a scholarship there, I was always hunting for scholarship money because we were funding. This is all self-funded here. So anyway, did that and then got good grades and was able to, applied to firms out there and reached out to a number of firms in the Pacific Northwest. And even as we applied for clerkships, you often get internships in law school between your second and third years. And so you apply for those right at the start of your second year. And I was applying to firms that they all interview you and they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you think? And I'd be like, I want to be a food and beverage business lawyer. And this was like late 90s when like .com was taking off, cell phones and telecom was a big deal. And like food was decidedly not cool then. So most of them are like, or we have a commodities practice. Do you want to work in Chicago or something like that? And I'm like, no, like these are sophisticated businesses. And from what I can tell, like big law firms don't pay enough attention. Mm-hmm. And small firms are great, but often don't have like just the legal chops. And I think there's an opportunity here. And so this law firm, Davis, Wright, Tremaine, had a number of industry practices in healthcare and telecom and media and other things. And they thought, oh, that's kind of interesting, kid. Give it a shot. Just make sure you make your hours. So I had a successful internship here, got a job offer, and then started from day one here working on food and ag projects. Some of the very first of which were in the Oregon wine industry. Two things led to that. One, a former partner of the firm, just back up a little bit, the godfather of Oregon liquor law was a gentleman by the name of Jim Neal. He didn't do a ton in the wine space. He worked a lot more with restaurants and hotels and resorts and stuff like that. But he knew everybody at the OLCC and knew how to get things done. Really great mentor. And then another former partner, Ben Wolf, had started kind of the initial steps of our wine practice here. Ben had worked in the wine industry in California, actually with his own company, before he became a lawyer, and had started our relationship with a few, real short list of but interesting clients in Oregon who were in business by the late 90s, and then also had started our relationship with the Oregon Wine Growers Association, and kind of DWT being the general counsel for OWA was from Ben. Ben was not devoted to food and ag, so his career grew quickly and moved on to other things, and it was a lane I wanted to be in, so I just stuck with it. So kind of the fast forward part of it is that first year I was a lawyer, maybe like 10% of my time was working for food and ag clients, a good bit of it, which was stuff like in Oregon wine. And then the rest was other things that made me a better lawyer and working for partners here that I liked. And then that 10% literally doubled every year. I was geeky enough to track it kind of with my stats and econ background. It literally doubled like every year. So 10, 20, 40, 80. And by the time I was a fifth year lawyer, all I was doing was food and ag work. Again, a significant chunk of which was helping a lot of people form LLCs and buy land to develop vineyards and wineries on. And then made partner here in a fast track, and we started hiring team members who are now my partners here still, many of them. And that's kind of how I got started in wine.
Tell me about the industry as you got to know it. What did it look like, and how did you kind of ingratiate yourself into it? How did you start to meet people and understand the industry?
Because a lot of my introductions came through our early work for the OWA. We kind of, back then the industry was a lot smaller, of course, but we also kind of ended up being drawn to the people who are sort of prone to be joiners and really trying to help the whole Oregon wine industry grow. I think my first OWA board meeting was spring 1999. I think that was in Corvallis around what they used to call grape days, when the researchers would do their stuff. I remember being at kind of the annual meeting, and they'd elect officers and regional reps and things like that and talk about things. So, started getting to know people there. And then also there were a couple of real estate brokers who were also really important at the time. Lisa Neal, she and her husband Scott. I don't know if you've interviewed Lisa, but yeah, at Coeur d'Alene, right? Lisa was a really smart, hardworking young real estate broker who really took the time to understand sites and soils and everything. And she did a great job of meeting buyers who were like, I hear there's these cool things going on in wine in Oregon. We want to do that. And she and I worked together on a lot of new clients that were coming into the region. And, some of those we formed, built, grew, developed, and some of them have now been successful brands that have sold, over the course of my career. But that was a lot of it, just, being around joiners and being real curious. And then I think too, while that wine practice was growing for me too, the lessons we were learning from other food and ag industries that I was spending time in, which quickly grew beyond Oregon, to the Pacific Northwest, and then now California, and now what we do is national. We learned a lot that we could bring back to it. Again, there's a handful of great, lawyers who had been sort of ag country lawyers in McMinnville and places like that, who kind of the wine industry grew up around them, and they're trusted advisors, and many of them still are. Maybe didn't have the, breadth of perspective that we were able to have by working at a firm like this, and the just kind of the number of observations we could have, not only from one industry, but a different set of industries and a different set of clientele, and sort of bring all that best and a little bit of fearlessness to bear.
So before I ask more about wine, I'm curious, you mentioned obviously sort of starting small, starting local, and branching out into other ag and to other states. Tell me about some of the other industries with which you've had a kind of a strong relationship.
Definitely craft beer, craft spirits on the alcohol industry side. But then it's mostly other kind of high value, sort of middle processed goods like frozen fruit packers, now, berries, tree nuts, citrus, apples, things like that. And then we also do a lot with high value consumer product brands, including some of the coolest ones that have come out of Oregon. So we worked with the Dave's Killer Bread family, helping them grow their business and sell. We worked with Salt and Straw. We worked with Voodoo Donut. We've worked with Brazy Bites and Honey Mamas still, and Pan's Mushroom Jerky, and kind of you name it. We kind of want to be, we don't set out to represent everybody with sort of a food truck and a pipe dream, but Oregon, the companies and leaders who are going to have good plans and great products and are going to be well funded. We want to help them make good decisions to be some of the next great brands coming out of Oregon. And then, in terms of other regions, then we do that now also around the country.
What is your sort of identification process, or how do you determine who it is who's ready for that kind of representation, that kind of leap?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, if I like somebody, I'm really bad at saying no. Individuals, I'm truly in this business for the relationships. It's been a great career and it's lucrative and we get to do cool things. Some people become lawyers because they like complicated stuff, or some people like the power, the prestige, or whatever that allegedly comes with it. I just really like helping good people and interesting companies have success, and I get disappointed when they fail. So how do I decide? So it's that one. It helps if we like you, but when I think about where we're going to, especially for early stage companies, where are we going to invest time? It's like, yeah, is it a delicious product? Do you know what you know and also don't know what you don't know? So you're likely to take good advice, not just from us, but from other experts. I think I like working with entrepreneurs that are like very ambitious, but not like unrealistic. I don't know. I probably do have like some criteria, but that's one of them. One of the hardest things about growing a wine brand is that, like, as compared to other categories, wine is a category that almost invites sampling behavior. I'll try this wine from this place this week, and the next day I'm going to try something else. Like, there's not a ton of brand loyalty there, as opposed to like when we work with Dave's Killer Bread. I'd be like, once you decide what bread you like, you buy the same bread every single week. So just that if I was going to like investing money in either appreciating assets, which wineries and vineyards certainly can be, but also in brands where you can have like high velocity sales and brand loyalty is helpful.
Mm-hmm. So as you got to understand the Oregon wine industry in those first, say, 5 years, what did you see as sort of the strengths of the industry, and what did you see as the biggest areas of need, at least from the perspective of what you could bring?
Yeah, I think, some of the strengths were, certainly a cohort of founders who you've already talked to, I'm sure, who are like just really determined and collaborative. Like, that's one of the things I saw. And then, most of the folks who followed on kind of have largely adopted that spirit. Mm-hmm. Kind of a figured out and work together mentality. Also, they all started, for the most part, as small businesses, so it's not like they were hiring lots of other people to do things for them. It wasn't a big company experience, so that sort of 360 vision of the industry was pretty good. So it was I would say, a mix of, the founders, some mom and pops who are just curious and spending retirement dollars, and then some other young families that really believed in the vision too. That was a lot of it. There wasn't then, much. There was some, but there wasn't then, much sort of as much employment opportunity, or even founders coming in who had like deep credentials in the wine industry, either through experience or academics or both. A lot of people, this was pretty early in their wine and vineyard journey. And that's so different than today. Now our industry is full of professionals who know what they're doing.
So what did you see as your role in helping the industry?
Well, I think we had kind of, it kind of takes kind of two paths. One role was certainly like through the OWA and just helping it be an advocate for the vineyard and wine industry in the state, to try to make Oregon, like, at least from a sort of a legal and regulatory perspective, the best place to grow grapes and make wine and sell and be wine and be a wine consumer in the country. And we've largely accomplished that, honestly. Like, the Oregon winery license is the best liquor license in the country in terms of the breadth and flexibility of what it can let you do. So that's pretty cool. We did a lot of fixes around, edges writing rules and statutes that then the industry lobbied and got passed. That was cool. Then some of that predated me joining the industry in the late 90s already, but we continued to carry that forward. And then helping Just helping the industry organize itself, provide a lot of resources for kind of free resources, really, for people coming into the industry. That was one kind of channel. And then the other channel or the other path was working for all these individual clients. Just helping to make, it's complicated business, the same rules that apply to Budweiser in beer or Gallo in wine apply to, a small company trying to figure it out in Oregon. And it's complicated. It's farming, it's food processing, it's consumer packaged goods, it's retail, it's alcohol, it's employment, it's ag employment. There's just all the things that could be hard about just almost any one business are all cobbled together inside an estate winery in particular. So, getting around the block and then helping, especially if growing businesses avoid landmines, help them solve and advocate for, good solutions to just help them give as many tools and increase their likelihood of success, at the sort of entity level for sure. And then, I've been at it 10 years or so, and then that was when sort of kind of a new wave of maybe 10 or 15 years, a new wave of then kind of, investment and acquisition started happening. For me, the first one was we helped Saint Michel, and its then CEO, Ted Basler, acquire Erath, which is a really cool experience. I do this work in Washington too, and I was at an event at Washington State where I was on the advisory board for the School of Hospitality Management, and I was seated. I happened to be seated. I don't know. I'd been practicing 8 or 9 years. It feels like, I don't know. And I was seated at a table with Ted Basler, and we were going around with all these Cougar alums, mostly from the state of Washington, and everybody said, "What do you do?" And and when it got to me, I said, "Well, I'm a lawyer in Oregon. I work a lot with the Oregon wine industry." And everybody was like, Oregon wine, we're these big guys up here in Washington and California, and what do you guys know what you're talking about? And sort of after it got back to Ted, Ted's like, well, actually Oregon's pretty cool, and we've always been really interested in Oregon, just haven't found the right opportunity yet. So after that dinner and kind of during coffee and dessert or whatever, when people are mingling a little bit more, I go up to Ted and say, well, great to meet you. And I didn't know him. And here I'm pretty early in my career here, and he's the CEO of a big deal wine company. And I said, we kind of through our work with OWA and other people, we pretty much know everybody in the wine industry, or at best half a step of separation. And I know there's a lot of interesting businesses out there that really already are going to be needing succession plans that don't have it, so if you're really interested, sometimes send me a list of names that you'd be interested in doing a deal with, and I'll see if I can make some introductions. I said, oh, thanks. And then I got down there, I'm like, oh, shit, I overplayed that one. Who did I think I was? And then I was like, well, I'll sit on my hands for a couple weeks, and then if I don't hear from Ted, I'll send Ted a note. And we hadn't done any work for Saint Michel at the time yet. And then, within a few days, Ted sends me an email and sends me 3 names of companies he wanted to talk to. And the top of the list was Erath. And I'm like, well, I know Dick, and I know the people who work with Erath closely, and let me see if they'd take a meeting. They did, and we started, very slowly. Ted flew down, and I met him, picked him up at the hotel here in a then very old BMW. I only had about a 1-year life of a BMW experiment, which was stupid, because I could only afford an old one, and then it broke down all the time, and was really expensive to fix. So literally, Ted and I drive down to out Warden Hill Road, and first we go up and just kind of drive around, don't say anything because it's early in the morning, up at the winery, and then we go up the hill to where Dick's house is, which is now the Silver Oak Toomey facility, where we work with those guys too. But driving up that hill and literally I'm like 2/3 of the way up there with Ted Basler, CEO of, to me, like the biggest deal client that I'd worked with yet to date. And like my car throws a fan belt. So for some, I don't remember quite how. I did manage to get it up to Dick's, like we pulled it and the car's off. So we get in, we have the meeting, and we're going in, and fortunately Ted's kind of like a car guy. And Dick is great, and Dick says, well, just, I've got one of my guys is a whiz, let me, just give me your keys, and we'll take our meeting, and he'll, see what he can do. Okay, and so I'm sweating, right? Because I'm just a fool. Why didn't I rent a car or something? Doing it, we have a great meeting, to get to know you with Dick and Ted Basler around Dick's kitchen table. And I was like, yeah, this is interesting. Maybe we should start pursuing something here, evaluate it anyway. It was mostly an all-day meeting through, long morning, lunch, couple hours, mostly just storytelling, and they were comparing notes, and I just kind of was sitting there. Anyway, we get done with the meeting. It's like, okay, now what are we going to do? Dick says, well, listen, if, I think he ran in to look for parts in town. So if you don't have it, you can take one of the farm trucks back to Portland. I'm like, oh, that'll be cool. And literally, we're exiting the door, and this guy comes in and hands me the keys fixed. And he had run down to Napa and Newburgh and bought the fan belt, had it up on the lift in Dick's shop, and fixed my car. And then Ted and I chatted the whole way home, and then we slow danced between San Michelle and Dick Erath for about 6 months, and then started getting serious about negotiating a letter of intent. And then 4 or 5 months later, we did what was then, sort of the biggest acquisition. There had been, certainly DDO's investment, but it was the first acquisition where somebody paid value created from an Oregon winery, which was pretty cool. And now, there's a bunch of those stories minus the fan belt.
No more German cars going up Prince Hill.
No. I'm just not even a BMW guy anyway.
I'm curious about that process from initially talking to Ted to broaching it to Dick to putting them together to, like you said, that's the year-long conversation. What did you learn about, I guess, sort of the non-law side of an acquisition like that, about the sort of the personal side or the unforeseen things that are parts of those kinds of deals?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think first, for a business like Erath, that wasn't a company that was established in order to sell someday. Founders in a lot of industries, and including probably some founders in wine today, start a business to expect to sell it. Most businesses in the wine industry aren't like that, though, and certainly Erath and most others aren't. And so they really are they are looking, founders are looking for stewards. They're really proud of where, they're proud of their geography, they're proud of the vineyards they've established. They know, and in that case, Dick literally pretty much still knew every vine, even though it was a pretty big operation. In a company like that, literally his last name is. So when you're, identifying a buyer, you want to find, a real value alignment kind of top to top, especially. And I think Dick and Ted found that, and that certainly is played out in a lot. There's a certain point, certainly price matters, but there's just, some of those potential relationships are like oil and water, and it needs to, there needs to be business people that get along. That one was different too, because there was no investment bankers. A lot of times now there's an investment banker involved, right? Who's kind of the middle person, representing and trying to get a bunch of people interested. But this was a proprietary, deal. So it was really important to cement those. Again, I just come back to the relationships, really.
Did you notice anything after that sale? You mentioned the first kind of value created sale and the first founder of the industry to sell. Did you notice anything change? Did you notice the industry change in any way after that? Was there something notable about that moment?
Well, I think it said that was possible, that you could create something that created, some wealth for your family out of a wine business in Oregon. particularly because it was coming from another wine company. It wasn't just like the next high net worth individual who wanted their own kind of big hobby, but it was really coming from credible business people. So it said that was possible. And that hadn't really happened. That had been happening in California, of course, for a long time, but it hadn't really happened in the Pacific Northwest at all. That said that was possible. So I think that put a lot of credibility into other people's investments and business plans in hindsight, It also was exciting. I mean, Erath was a pretty big volume brand there. And, well distributed, but now we have a national wine company saying we are excited to put an Oregon Pinot Noir in our portfolio everywhere we sell wine. And I'm not sure that had, a heavily distributed brand, I'm not sure that had really happened before. They were homegrowns. King Estate was doing it, Willamette Valley Vineyards was doing it, stuff like that. But in terms of somebody new saying, no, this is what I want to invest in, and bring into a portfolio, that was cool. Good kind of to say, well, our portfolio is not full in the new world if we don't have an Oregon Pinot Noir. That was cool.
So you mentioned that was sort of the start of a lot of merger and acquisition over the next, I guess, 20-ish years now. Yeah. Tell me about some of the notable ones for you, either in terms of your personal involvement or ones that you thought were of particular importance to the industry.
Yeah, one that was really noteworthy was small, but was interesting. At an event, we usually host a dinner the night before the Oregon Winegrowers Symposium that we just try to invite a different mix of group every year, but kind of like some of it's influencers or people we want to get to know in the industry. It's not always like the biggest clients of ours, something like that, but just people that we think would enjoy that experience. We kind of rotated around. And at one of them, I invited Kevin Chambers, of course, who was involved early in OVS in his own vineyards, including his residence vineyard. And we had worked with Kevin. And at our dinner, Kevin met Robert Nicholson of International Wine Associates. And Robert kind of had in his back pocket the knowledge that Jadot was interested, was curious about Oregon. And, there's Burgundy, Bowen-based, generations-long company, had never invested outside of Burgundy. And so, long story again, they met at IWA, and IWA connected to Jadot. And I know Jadot came down and met with Kevin and experienced the sites. And Kevin had done something that we had always recommended that vineyard owners do, which is like if someone's making it, keep a single vineyard, keep a library of single vineyard wines made from your vineyard. It'll be helpful when you go to sell your vineyard. And so after the site visits and things, I wasn't there, but I know Jadot tasted through Kevin's bottlings from the residence vineyard. And that was kind of what sealed the deal. Like, we can taste, they said, we can taste this place across vintages, across, whatever the climate brought one year or another, where they could taste the place. So that was really noteworthy. They ended up making wine at Tresatum, who was another client of ours, because Tresatum had a lot of small lot, kind of fermentation approach that looked a lot like what I had seen when I happened to be in Beaune visiting Jadot. So that was cool. That was a small one, but noteworthy, kind of just for that. And then, we've since then helped a lot of other successful exits, including with some of the international players. We helped the Ponzis sell to Bollinger. We worked with Beaufrere on its exit. We recently worked with Rocco on their deal with Santa Margarita, Roy and Bollinger. So, So those are all, and then certainly, the domestic transactions too, but the international ones are kind of fun. The international buyers, especially, are always very afraid of the U.S. legal system.
Your time to shine?
Well, yeah, honestly, you can freak out buyers pretty easily. We've always tried to be, kind of the culture of our group is tried to be like, we want to be really good at what we do and really, be able to go toe to toe with anybody in the country or on the planet on some of that kind of stuff. But sort of leave it in our pocket unless we need it. And then if there is a problem that pops up, which happens in the course of any of these deals, because we've been around the industry so much, know how to solve it really practically. And, that doesn't always happen. M&A generalists will freak out about something that they don't understand. Because lawyers who are smart, and most lawyers are smart, will work really hard and keep writing and talking until they figure it out. And that usually wears most people down. So if we can get to a quick solution that's practical and fair, that's what helps these things get done.
You talked earlier about the Oregon winery license and the sort of the strength of it. I'm curious about how you've seen law in Oregon around wineries, around vineyards change. Have there been notable changes since you've been practicing, and how have you sort of had to adapt to changes?
Yeah, there's certainly been, first of all, just again, the Oregon fearlessness to test limits. One thing that I don't know that it's been a big driver of sales, but was cool and noteworthy at the time, but craft breweries were doing growlers all the time. And for some reason, TTB kept saying, you can't fill a wine growler from it. And people were starting to do keg wines. They're like, you can't fill wine in a growler because that's bottling. We're like, what? That makes no sense. And so we went around with TTB a little bit, and their answer didn't make sense. So with OWA and a few wineries that cared, we wrote an Oregon law that said it was okay and sort of dared TTB to stop us. And then they're like, oh yeah, I guess it's okay. So now I think most states in the country that have wineries allow growlers. That was kind of cool. Like I say, it was just partly because common sense and accurate reading of the law ought to prevail. So that was fun. And we got that done and wrote guidelines and stuff. But in terms of other things, I think it's just, certainly, land use and how people promote and do their wines in farm country is tricky. We have good land use laws that enable commercial uses in farm zones within reasons. And, as the industry gets more competitive and people look for, how to attract consumers and get wine club members, some people get really aggressive. Other people get, lawfully creative. We've never had anybody come and ask us, how do we break the law? The folks that come to us, want to operate within the law and do the best they can. So we've, been in and around that. That gets ugly sometimes. I don't like it when it's neighbor on neighbor. And usually the problems arise because some local governments don't enforce rules they have, but that's changed. There was, when I was the first part of my career too, there was still, the background of pressure against direct shipping with some people trying to, say that kids are getting wine by ordering expensive Pinot Noir and shipping it to their dorm rooms. That wasn't real. And so Oregon definitely participated in and became part of the Free the Grapes kind of movement that now has got BTC legal everywhere. That had evolved. And again, with that opportunity comes responsibility. So we try to make sure, our clients and industry members here in Oregon are responsible with it, right? It is a controlled substance. It is, it is an inebriant, right? It is addictive. So we need to be responsible with it. People, shouldn't shirk that. So we're true to that. But those are probably the biggest things, and then it's more on the deal side, the advent of sophisticated, kind of like capital coming in, investors and investment structures and the buyers.
How does that change it for you?
Well, when you're kind of running your own mom and pop business, like you can tolerate more things that are kind of either you're operating in gray areas or your books aren't that good or we have a lot of handshake contracts and stuff like that. But like if I'm going to come in and write you a big check to either acquire your winery or be an investor in your winery, right? You need to know that things are more reliable beyond just kind of mom and pop. So that's everything from employment systems to grape contracts and distribution agreements and all that. So that part's good, frankly, good for lawyers because that stuff takes our advice to help.
One of the things we've heard in our process of interviewing people has been talking about the Carlton Winemaker Studio, and it's kind of the pushing the boundaries with alternating proprietorship. I'm curious from your perspective about that, about how it sort of came to be and what it has meant for the industry.
Yeah, well, Eric and Louisa Homaker, Ponzi Homaker, and the Lumpkins, had the idea that we should develop the first designated alternating proprietorship facility, right, in Oregon. A lot of people were doing custom crush around the edges, but custom crush has its drawbacks when people want to kind of control their own regulatory destiny and actually be a winery as an alternating proprietor. So Eric had worked, we ended up representing the studio and their company, but we also, with OWA, helped. One of the things we first had to do is OWA used to have a policy that two businesses couldn't be licensed at the same address. So we had to change the law to make that possible when you're an alternating proprietor. We worked with OLCC, kind of a rules expert, I think was the title, Chris Hansen. After he retired from OLC, he ended up working for us for a few years. But we wrote the kind of the guidelines sort of for how to be a proper alternating proprietor. We sort of established, working through for the studio and a few other places, what a winery hosting agreement looked like. Sometimes those agreements now are still coming back to us, and I see our words on it that we wrote like 20 years ago. Because they just bounce around the industry in different forms. Sometimes they're very screwed up by the time they get back to us. But so that was fun, and a big deal. It's certainly a really noteworthy venture out there. And another one that's grown and sold, which is cool. Stayed local with the Hampton Lumber family.
So you mentioned earlier that a big part of your job, especially early on, was helping people to avoid landmines. I'm curious what are the most common obstacles you see either in starting something like a wine business or in attempting to sell it?
One of the things that happens, because wine in a lot of environments can be tough to sell, a lot of people, unfortunately, don't get paid by their wine distributors because they just shipped them wine and maybe got tied up in a franchise distribution arrangement. So they not only aren't getting paid by distributor A in a particular state, they now can't even fire distributor A. That's kind of an easy landmine to avoid if you know what you're doing. Then there's no pay wineries too. Frankly, they don't pay growers, which is disappointing. So we've done a lot with helping people understand their lien rights and stuff like that. I think other landmines are just getting, overly in debt, not enough of, equity capital, and just getting really in deep with banks is hard, and so, most folks, enjoy the journey, but still want to retire when the wine journey is done. And that's going to be hard to do unless you've got something either to sell or still some retirement funds left in the war chest. So I think it's that. Just make smart decisions. Don't get sued over silly stuff you could have avoided.
It's like pretty good life advice in general.
It is, yeah.
Those things.
Yeah, the life advice I always say too, for especially any business owner, not just wineries, but and they're business partners is surprise is bad for every relationship. So especially if you've got bad news, like pick up the phone early. Say, this is not going to come off very good, but we need to talk about something. Just whether it's distributors or grape growers, whatever, just don't surprise people with bad news. They'll let them find out after the fact, because by then they'll have assumed the worst. And it's pretty good. I will say too, in Oregon, there hasn't been a lot of or in the Oregon wine industry, there's not been a lot of Oregon on Oregon litigation. Most people do work things out.
So you're 25-ish years into this now. I'm curious about outside of just pure size, what is different about the Oregon wine industry now in 2025 than in, say, 2000?
It was never easy because we were still Oregon. But, the industry was growing. The demographics of wine consumers were right. There were a lot of people who could, buy or build a winery and have a little tasting room. If the wine was good because it was made from good Oregon grapes, they'd do okay. And it was change. It's just, more competitive here. It's, more external pressures, whether it's, people who invested 15, 20 years ago in your business and finally want their cash back. Or, banks and creditors hassling you, or, other disruptions and supply chain. Smoke didn't used to be a thing. We did it, when that was all happening in 2020, we were deeply involved with a bunch of education about had to do with grapes that had to, or apparently needed to be rejected because of smoke taint and all of that. That was new. That was a climate issue that became a legal issue. I would say, unfortunately, for some people, it's just less fun than it was there for a while. It's not that it's not fun, and there are certainly also businesses doing really well, but, if I compare certainly 2025 to 25 years ago, it's harder. And it wasn't easy then, just the challenges are different, I think. Good news, most people who drink wine now know that Oregon makes wine, and they look for it on a list. That's good.
With all of the challenges, some of which you just mentioned, and others that are unspoken so far, what does the industry look like to you now, as you from your perspective in 2025, and what do you foresee for the next few years?
What does it look like now? Is that what you said? Yeah. I think it's full of a lot of professionals. It wouldn't surprise me if we see some just attrition of brands going away. Those production facilities, those vineyards will stick around. I don't know if we'll see a lot of vineyards removed, like is happening in Washington and California right now. But we'll probably see some retrenching, at least, of businesses. Maybe be a little bit more focused, a little bit stronger, or and then some continued consolidation of brands and companies that are successful. There's that. What would I hope for? Or expect looking out. I hope that we can continue to see some more diversity in the wine industry. That's not just in the cellar and in the vineyards, but we see more Black, brown, female-led, LGBTQ winery owners and executives of the wine industry, and its consumers, frankly, still doesn't represent what most of our country looks like in other categories. So I think that's something to figure out. And we're seeing some of that's led by kind of some celebrity brands too that have the ability to get that message out. But I think that's really important that we just that as we mature the Oregon wine industry, I just need to be more reflective of our communities. And some businesses are really purposeful about that, and others less so. It's a historically white elite industry. And that's not saying that people maybe have intentionally designed it that way, but we could probably be more intentional about unwinding it that way.
Let's look ahead for you a little bit. What is on your horizon, either personally or professionally, anything that you're excited about in the future?
Yeah, I'm just enjoying the growth of our team here. One thing that's cool, we just 2 weeks ago learned that So I founded the food and beverage group here. Like there were some people doing it, but I founded our group, and our group is now like 50 lawyers strong across the firm here and in San Francisco, Seattle, DC, LA mostly. We're the only law firm in the country that's ranked nationwide like as experts in both food and beverage categories, including alcohol. Alcohol, we're like one of the top 3 firms identified nationwide. And that's pretty cool. Literally the roots of that practice are in the Oregon wine industry. So that was new for us that we're now Band 1. It's this group called Chambers USA that talks to clients and our peer lawyers and does interviews and kind of ranks lawyers. So
Congratulations.
when you're not ranked, the rankings don't matter. But then when you get ranked, it's very cool. So yeah, that's cool. I was ranked as a Band 1 individual too, which is just kind of weird, pinch me moment. So good timing, I guess, for the conversation. But kind of cool. Like I mean, that even says something. Like when I started my practice, I kind of, people would say, well, what do you want to, how do you want to grow this? And I'm like, well, really, I would love it if we became like in law for food and bev, the Wyden and Kennedy of the ad industry, where people would literally fly to Portland to see their lawyers. And we're kind of doing that now, which is awesome. So that's fun to, have people that, I've helped hire and train just become experts in their own right. And, we've just a couple months ago, not even a month ago, just brought in like a new partner in our San Francisco office who's a deep expert in California wine industry and had been Michael Marr, he'd been general counsel at Harlan and at Jackson, and then was at another firm for a couple of years and really wants to be at a place where his practice can grow national. So now he's joined us there. And so we hadn't ever had boots on the ground for our alcohol practice really in Oregon and California before, and now we do. So just steps like that just continue to go. That's fun to like build that part of my business here with people who carry on, some of the culture that I think I've brought, to maybe the group, that how we do things is maybe different than some of our competitors. It's pretty cool. Ashley Volin is a partner of mine here. And her family was in the alcohol beverage distribution business, actually. And I remember she was a baby lawyer, first-year associate in our Seattle office, and had hired just to kind of in the general litigation group. And in our first firm-wide retreat, she was, I really like food and beverage, and I'm really interested. I want to get involved. And, now she's my partner, and in the firm and really successful, great litigator, works in this space and she does a lot in the dairy industry too. Like it's just really cool to have helped other people's careers develop by being an industry expert. And really for just about everybody, I get everybody doing stuff for Oregon Wine too, which is cool.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
We didn't reach out to you until you were a Band 1 lawyer, to be perfectly honest. So
That's why I kept postponing.
we were just waiting. That's all the questions that I have for you today. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about today?
No, I mean, just I'm just thinking about other people who did really cool things. Joe Dobbs, there's sort of, you've probably touched on this in your other conversations, but there's all these like little winemaker / business like family trees, and like one that I always feel like is a little bit understated is like the Gary Andrus Archery Summit family tree. Maybe you've touched on that a lot, but like Sam Tannehill, I was not too long, well, it's been a couple of years, but not that long ago, I was looking at some really old like documents at Archery Summit, and like Sam Tannehill was like the junior kind of vineyard manager for Gary Andrus at Archery Summit, which was like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like that was how Sam got to Oregon. That's cool. Joe Dobbs making wine at Willamette Valley Vineyards and other places, and then building that, Wine by Joe and all that. Just lots of fun, really hardworking, ambitious, quality humans. Sometimes I'm sure there's dots that can be connected that I haven't, but that's fun.
You have a pretty cool perspective on that. Kind of like ours, where you're not connected to one thing, but
we get to see it. Yeah, we get a lot of observations. Yeah, and we've always tried to bring those lessons to bear. We don't spill anybody else's secrets to another client, but like people know that we know how to get things done, and I think value our trust, and I can still text with Ed King and Jim Renault and whomever, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like to be, it feels good to be, sort of a trusted advisor to people that I respect. And some of them too, like I'll reach out to, some of these founders and executives for advice about how I should run my team. They're just business leaders that I admire. They had to be remarkably ambitious.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For sharing your time with us, sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it.
It's great to meet you guys.
Thank you, and we'll let you off the hook.
Thanks.